Hello and welcome to Builders. I'm your host Lee Haynes, and today's guest is Helena Babelon, Global Head of IT Sustainability at Siemens, a leader working at the intersection of digital transformation and environmental impact. At Siemens, Helena is helping redefine how IT can drive sustainability at scale, from decarbonizing operations and greening the supply chain to enabling circularity and transparent reporting through data and technology. We'll discuss her journey, Siemens' sustainability strategy, and how technology can become a genuine force for good. Helena, a warm welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lee. Very happy to be here today.
Fantastic. Let's start with your background, shall we? How did your journey in tech begin, and what drew you towards sustainability early on?
Well, I did mechanical engineering studies. And when I was looking for a job, this was in the end of the 90s. So it was really the IT boom. So I got a job in the IT sector. I started working for Electrolux. So that was really kind of the start for me coming into IT and so on. And I've seen the evolution ever since. And then
Fantastic.
on the...
And what?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, and then in the aspect from sustainability, so I think that's maybe something that when you grow older, you start to reflect why you kind of get passionate about something, because this is really an area that I am passionate about and super happy to be able to work with it, because I think you can drive so much more impact if you can do something at your work in a company and as such a big corporation as Siemens, than what you can, as a private individual. So I think the sustainability aspect for me really came from my childhood, early childhood, because I grew up in the 70s. And that was the oil crisis. It was the nuclear demonstrations and also elections here we had in Sweden. And that was something that we were actually at my kindergarten. We were involved in this. And then when I was really young, with my parents built our house. And we had been in Northern California for some time. And my father was studying there. And we had solar panels on our house, and this was 45 years ago. So it was kind of one of the first houses in Sweden, which was quite, different. So I mean, before starting school, I had learned, at least about the power of the sun, about nuclear energy, and also oil crisis and so. And this kind of made me interested in this field.
Fantastic. And what pivotal moments made you realize that IT itself could be, a key enabler of sustainability?
Well, I think this was when I worked in IT. I worked in different areas, and always kind of in the area between the business and IT, working on business requirements and so forth. So I was always kind of interested in what the business was driving and where we were going. And Electrolux was very early, focusing on sustainability and driving it. So as a company, we pushed a lot in this area. And I was interested in that. And I was hearing the sustainability department, how they were talking about, how we were, decarbonization our operations and putting solar panels on the roofs of our factories and so forth. So this kind of resonated to my interest area. So I had a lunch with the person who was driving this energy efficiency program for the group. And while talking to him, he said, well, actually now we need to understand our footprint in transportation, and we need to improve our transportation footprint. And he was the department, they were working with Excel and they didn't really have access to data and so forth. And at the same time, I was actually part of the project that was rolling out a big transportation system. So I said, but we should, look at this from a system perspective and build in, the calculations you need to do. And you should have, tools and systems. We should put the data into data warehouse, not kind of do manual calculations in Excel spreadsheets and so. So I really saw the potential here that from what we were working on with IT to support the sustainability department in what they were driving and so. And I think that was maybe quite unique, so to say, that normally IT wouldn't maybe have their eyes so much on the sustainability department and what they were driving, since that's usually kind of a very small unit in a company.
Exactly. So Siemens has, a strong global sustainability mission, right? Like many of the kind of bigger corporations have nowadays, at least. How does this global sustainability mission translate into the IT strategy at Siemens? So how does your work kind of connect to the company's larger purpose of, transforming the everyday?
So what we have done is in IT is that we have actually put sustainability as one of the strategy pillars also that we are focusing on within IT, kind of to resonate with the strategy and the purpose, and the sustainability framework that Siemens is working for. So I think this really helps in order to drive. And in this strategy, we have targets, yearly targets that we kind of jointly work on across all of the IT units. So I mean, this by having this anchored from the top, I mean, this really helps to get to focus on it. And we also have, I mean, I'm working closely with the sustainability department together with my team and so on, and supporting them. So I mean, all of these kind of connections are there and are structured, and as a big corporation, this is really important, to have in place in order to really be efficient.
Yeah. And you mentioned there that you're working with the sustainability team. Where does your team like sit organizationally, and how do you work like in practice? How do you work with other business units to ensure that IT becomes a kind of sustainability enabler?
Yeah, so I'm very happy because this is a quite new setup for Siemens. It's like 1.5 years ago that my role was created at Siemens. So I'm part of the IT leadership team, the corporate IT leadership team, and I'm reporting to our CIO, Hanna Henning. So I mean, from that perspective, I mean, sustainability is really part of the leadership team, and I think that really helps, in order to kind of set the focus, because sustainability is an area which is very broad. You cannot say that you work only here. It goes across the whole organization, and you need data for the reporting, as you were referring to. You need the data from the whole company, so to say, in order to report. So, and then we are working together with the sustainability department, but also other functions, of course, very important. We have the procurement organization, we have EHS organizations, then we have the different businesses and so forth. And we are trying to work jointly, because many of these demands and solutions, has to be coherent through the organization.
And Siemens, I believe, has this like 360-degree framework, right, that covers decarbonization, resource efficiency, circularity, and like people-centric innovation. I read. Can you share a few examples of how IT contributes to these pillars? I don't know, maybe something from data center optimization or software efficiency. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, from the degree framework as it is set up, I mean, then IT is supporting really with with many solutions and tools and data in order to kind of calculate and measure these targets that are set, scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, and so forth. And here we have, adapted architecture where we have a lot of source system that exist in different places in the business that are then the data is then brought into our data cloud that we have, and then we have reporting and also now working on dashboards that are really showing the progress of these targets, progress on a global level, but then also progress on a local country or region level, and so forth. And then when it comes to IT itself, of course, we are part of these emissions and we are part of this footprint. So then within IT, we're also working in order to make sure that our data centers run on renewable energy, and then the cloud providers that we're working on, that we also procure, that they procure renewable energy, that we can select the regions where they run the data centers from, and so on, and also working on transparency here in order to kind of adhere to the net zero target of Siemens as a group.
And to talk a little bit about sustainable IT, like is a really kind of broad term, to be honest. And just to kind of, for companies and also kind of professionals, individuals, to know where to start, basically. To give a little bit of context to the questions that I'm going to give here, there are different studies. There's one from Gartner that says that by 2027, so very soon, around 75% of organizations will have a data center infrastructure sustainability program, which is up from 5% in 2022. So a significant jump. There's more articles out there that show that, again, by 2027, 60% of CIOs will have environmental sustainability metrics embedded into their IT KPIs. So it's kind of showing how fast the shift is becoming part of core performance. So I think for many kind of IT leaders listening, the sustainability journey can feel quite overwhelming, because it's becoming more and more important, right? So my question is really, how do you determine where to start, what to measure, what truly matters?
Well, I think as usually when you work with sustainability and when you are as a company thinking where to start, there is something called a materiality assessment that you would do. And it's a bit of a matrix where you look at areas which are important for you and where you can drive impact. So I see the best thing is to kind of see you as an IT organization. What are the different areas that you are actually having in your IT organization? Because IT can be different, and then to see what is the impact from this and how can you actually improve and affect. And from that, you would, see the areas where you have the most impact and that you can drive. And this is the same as for the CSRD reporting, the European regulations. All the companies that now has to report according to the CSRD has to start with a materiality assessment. And you do this materiality assessment for your whole company, and that defines what are the KPIs that are set out there that you need to report on, so to say. So I would say that by this, and this is something that we've been doing, at Siemens, and that also happened at Electrolux when I worked there. So that kind of see, okay, what is important for you to drive? And I believe in many areas, as you said, data center is like one of the biggest thing, because of course there is a lot of footprint from an energy perspective. So if you are not on renewable energy, that is of course something to drive for. But then on data center, something which is maybe not so much talked about and so on, that's what it's called, the embodied carbon. Everything which is, in the servers and all the equipment and so on used for a data center. And this is, of course, now huge, especially with the evolution of AI. And so the data centers are today much more powerful, or that are needed. And then it comes to computers and desktops and so forth, and your supply chain.
And Yeah, we'll talk a bit about AI and digitalization for sustainability shortly. But before we do, in terms of procurement and IT procurement, how do you embed sustainability into decision making there? Whether it's supplier selection or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think something what is important to have is that you have sustainability requirements as part of your contract and as part of your RFP selection. And they're usually, I mean, they are criteria. If you look at hardware, in the area of hardware, there are certifications. So there are specific global certifications, TCO, for example, for computers, monitors, mobile phones, and it's also evolution out into servers and so and that is, I think, a very good standard to go through. And when it comes to TCO, what I think it's nice because it's spanning from the whole life cycle of the IT equipment, from the production and design, from the use phase, and also how you can actually recycle and repair your product, and it requires a third party certification. And then of course you should look at the energy efficiency of your devices that you buy, what type of material is like recycled plastic used, what type of steel. You can also look at transportation, to demand that maybe your laptops are not getting transported via air freight, that you can select maybe to have ship or so, and those kind of demands you can actually have and put on your suppliers, and they are selections to do. And then when it comes to data centers and cloud, as I said, here it's important to get the transparency. That is getting easier and easier. I mean, I've been working on this for several years, and now the big hyperscalers, they are actually supplying dashboards where you can actually see your carbon emission, and you can also understand better the locations of where the data centers you are using, where you have your cloud. And then I would say the last part, which is super important and not to forget, it's about the collaboration. So, I mean, this is like the Sustainable Development Goal number 17, about the partnership. Because, I mean, I believe that IT has a lot of suppliers, and I mean, also the one you work a lot with, you should also understand the businesses from both sides and try to see what can we do together. Because, I mean, on both sides, the supplier and the customer, on both sides, there is development and there is evolution happening. And how can we maybe jointly, support this evolution? So I believe that this is a big thing where innovative ideas can be done and so forth.
You mentioned the word impact earlier, and how that's a good place for companies to start, or to think about when they're wondering where to start when it comes to sustainability. Right now, you've helped pioneer the Handprints, Footprints, and Heartprint model at Siemens, I think. Could you walk us through what each of these means, and how they help you to measure and communicate impact?
Yeah, so the handprint, that's really about enabling the sustainability agenda for Siemens, for the company. So this is how you, with IT or technology, can support the sustainability for the company. So this could be, in driving sustainability in the IT operations, supply chain, and so on. So a little bit what the solutions I was referring to before. And the footprint, that's really about IT itself, how within IT we make sure that the IT we deliver, like the backbone of the company, that how this is as sustainable as possible. And then the Heartprint, that is about the people and society that you also referred to a bit before, and this is a lot about awareness and training. And then it's also about how you can, maybe do greater things for good. We have, for example, volunteering programs and so forth, and partnership, I would say is a part here.
And there was going to be a follow-up question here, like a particular or kind of examples of initiatives across these three dimensions, but not just examples of initiatives, but also results that you might be seeing that you're particularly proud of. Can you talk about any of these?
Yeah, well, I think from the handprint perspective, I mean that's something big that is just in the happening now, because Siemens has a broken fiscal year, so we are just in the making of our first CSRD report. So this has of course been a huge project, and then the following up of this is now that we are building a dashboard, a global dashboard with the degree KPIs that you talked about, and also with some of the CSRD KPIs that can be visualized, by the different stakeholders. And I really believe, and this is what I've seen in my journey, from the start, from this very beginning, like the need in sustainability to have good dashboards and measures and so on, where you can track your KPIs best on a monthly basis if it's possible, and then also compare in between of departments or kind of units or so. That really drives the change if you set a target and you work towards that target. So that's something that I think that IT really helps to bring this transparency, so to say. So, and then when we come from the footprint, I think here we have, done many things, especially for our own data centers. We have renewable energy in the data centers, and we've also now received the ISO certification for the biggest data center that we have. And we are also working a lot, as I said, we have these requirements in place for our suppliers. So we are working, very close with our tier 1 suppliers and some of the tier 2 in order to drive together the sustainability, in order to understand how we can work together. And also something that I haven't spoken so much about, that's the area of e-waste. I mean, that is the largest growing waste waste type in the world. And I mean, here it's really important that as a company, you care about what happens to your used IT equipment, because normally we don't use it so long. So what we are doing here, mainly for Germany, some other countries, we have for several years partnering with an ITAD company who are collecting our used IT equipment. And this company is actually a social company also. So around 40% of their workforce are with people living with disabilities. So I think this is a very good example of how you can have green and social IT at the same time. And then also together with them, we have also made sure that the computers, so of course, what they are doing is that they're refurbishing our used computers and then reselling it on the second market. And there is a very big second market out there, which I think many people doesn't really think about and understand the difference if you really take care of your used IT equipment in a good way, or just dump them, And here we have also supported in Africa. There is something called African Women Can Code. So with our used IT equipment, we have provided computers for these trainings, and also had employees who are mentoring these training these training sessions and so educations.
Well, fantastic. A real focus, in other words, at Siemens, and it's really, really interesting to hear, because I think more and more companies, let's face it, realize that sustainability reporting as well isn't just about compliance anymore. It's becoming a real source of competitive advantage and trust, right? It's really important.
And it's also something. I just wanted to add, it's
go on.
something which is very positive for employees. That's something that's
absolutely,
the employees, many employees really enjoy and doing something like this. To see that you actually do something which is also good for the environment or for the society that you live in. And so I think that is a positive, effect of focusing on these areas.
Completely agree. And I want to now talk a little bit about AI and digitalization for sustainability. You mentioned it briefly before. Now, I saw that Siemens has committed to, I think it's helping customers avoid 1,000 megatons of CO2e, carbon dioxide equivalent, by 2030. As yeah, I don't know. It's hard to kind of fathom, right? But it's an incredible ambition. Can you share a few examples of how AI or digitalization contributes to this goal? Either internally or through Siemens' different technologies.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, as you say, it is it's a bold goal, but then also as an organization, what we see with our operations and the products that we, or services and so on, that we are doing, the biggest impact that we can do is really with what we are supplying, to our customers, and so that is really where we have the possibilities, and there are so many different areas in our portfolios that we are doing that actually can link to this. So I think, I mean, just a couple of examples. We're working a lot with building efficiency. So then, of course, you can have energy management systems in your buildings. And here, with the use of AI, for example, of course, you can then much better project and run and simulate the usage and how you need to light or heat or cool or so on your building. So I mean, this is a huge area, of course. Another area which is quite interesting, it's, for example, water pipes, where in the pipes you can put meters that monitors the pressure of the water. And then you can spot leakage and much quicker, repair, and you can repair exactly at that moment, and this has also, shown to save a lot of leaked water, which is usually the case in pipes. And then maybe coming a little bit into IT and so on, and to data centers, as we're speaking on that. So for a data center, of course, the energy management is very important. So firstly, now with the big data centers that we have, so at Siemens, for example, in the Baltic, in Estonia, we've been working a lot with the largest data center there. First, the grid. So you can, when you're working with the smart grid, there with AI, you can actually have automatically power consumption monitored in order to avoid disturbances and so forth. And then within the data centers, there is also a lot of technology that you can use, the same for the building, for the energy management and so, but then also it's called a white area cooling, so that's the area where you have the servers. And this is now becoming super important because with the rise of AI,
Yeah.
cool air in, that is not sufficient any longer. So you need to have liquid cooling. And this is something that you, of course, can, optimize and so. And then also from a product perspective, developing products now, we also have, softwares in which you can simulate and you can make like digital twins on your whole factory or manufacturing process and so on. And through that simulate.
Yeah, I saw that. Digital twin technology is really, really interesting. I thought about it when you mentioned the word simulate earlier as well. So this is essentially, you're creating like virtual models of real systems, right, to simulate and optimize performance. So you can kind of test things or predict things before they're basically released into the real world. Right?
Exactly. So a digital twin, that is, a model of what you're doing, like the factory or the process line or a product before you build it. So of course, it's much more efficient to simulate something if you build up your factory digitally. in a system, and then you run through, the data and so on, you can much more effectively, before you start even building, be spot on. So and also, of course, it's a question of time, and especially on resources and so this is something which really has changed the industry, when you're able to do these simulations. So yes, nice you have read about it. It's a big thing.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool technology by the looks of it. I'd like to learn more. But also on the topic of AI, I think it's you were talking about energy management and everything, and how AI is maybe helping in this respect as well. Because it's interesting because there's a slight conflict as well, because AI itself consumes significant resources, like you were saying, right? It's from training the models to the energy required for the data centers, and different cooling methods and everything as well. So like how do you see the balance between AI as this kind of sustainability enabler versus AI as this kind of footprint contributor, basically?
Yeah. This is a really good question, and it's of course difficult, but I think you really have to say the balance you talk about. You have to make sure that what you're doing with AI, that the balance is positive, from an environment or impact perspective. So I mean, of course, as a person, maybe sometimes you could reflect on, yes, should I do a Google search, or do I need to do a ChatGPT search? If it's enough with a Google search, then that's probably better. But then there are many things that of course we can do with AI, which is supporting us, and especially what I see when we are using AI in examples, as I was talking about here, but also within a company, you can of course do a lot of process automations and so forth. So what we are focusing now internally, because this is really a topic that has kind of has had super intention internally, and actually many employees are thinking of this, because you hear a lot about water consumption for AI, energy, and so on. I think people can think of or so. So we are, making sure that the AI we use internally, that we are running that on renewable energy. For the learning and so, it's still not so easy to kind of understand and to get the transparency from the big suppliers here. But we are having, special focus, and as actually a target this year as part of our strategy is actually to better understand the environmental footprint, and also to see kind of what can we do, here, and how can we improve. So yes, it's double-sided, for sure in my role.
It is. Yeah, and I think it's just interesting, right? Because I think this global data center electricity demand is going to, increase significantly. It's going to increase or continue to increase significantly, right?
Yeah,
so, and I think a lot of this is driven, or by AI workloads, right? So I think transparency is becoming more critical than ever here, right?
Exactly, and we don't want that to happen, that this race of electricity that is maybe consuming or will not be kind of powered by renewable energy or so on. So
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's hard to predict now, I think, where we are in this very quick evolution and growth that we are seeing.
To move on to talking a little bit about leadership and some personal insights as well. You've spoken about the importance of leadership, commitment, and collaboration as well. What lessons have you learned about driving sustainability from within a large, let's say, complex organization like Siemens?
Well, I see from the past also, if I start from there, it's super important that you have the buy-in from the management, and you have the mandate from the top. And I believe that you need to have a team in place. You need to have the proper role and so on. You cannot really run this properly as just a project. I've had a lot of discussions and so on with other companies in this world. What is actually nice is that when you work on sustainability, you can collaborate openly, with a lot of other companies and so on, and share very freely, openly on what you do. And at many organizations, this hasn't really, come to the understanding that actually we need to actually create this organizational structure. And I'm super happy that I've been able to work for two companies who really have had this from the top, from the CIO, and then also especially from a company perspective, that the company really states that sustainability is important to us. And I think why that is that I think companies who realize that sustainability is actually a business benefit, and using it as that, then it gets into the company, and you can see that it actually it gives you money, it gives you benefits compared to competitors, and so on. Exactly. That it can have a competitive edge.
Yeah. And for professionals in tech, especially, I think, especially women as well, who want to kind of champion sustainability in their work, what advice would you give for making a real impact without, let's say, a formal sustainability title? Because a lot of people, they have this title and they think, I'm not working with sustainability. It's not my kind of remit. It's not my responsibility, yada, yada, yada. What advice would you give them for being really trying to make a real impact in the work they do?
Well, yeah, I would say, like, follow your passion. I believe in all work you do, you should always try to work with something that you like, that you're passionate about, that then you don't really count the hours at work, and you put the energy where your heart is. And I mean, as said, sustainability is so broad. So it can exist on so many different places. So I think that the opportunities, if you see opportunities and innovations and things that can be changed, share that and articulate that, and so on, and take the initiative, to show your ideas. And I think also, as all type of careers, I think it's very important to kind of share your goals and where you want to be, and your dreams with your managers and colleagues, and mentor and coaches, or also friends, because I mean, they are the ones that can support you, and can advocate for you. So and I mean, I think believe in this, that when you put a goal, and if you really kind of focus to it, and you do small things towards it, eventually you actually you get there. So I think be brave, and don't hold yourself back.
And are there any leadership practices that you found particularly effective for keeping purpose and progress aligned when leading global teams?
Well, I would say that I believe that this is important for a team, that you feel that you are related to the purpose of the company, and that's also, I mean, science also says that it's important that you feel the purpose. And I would say that I believe that working with sustainability, it's quite easy to kind of connect to the purpose of the company, what we are driving, but then also, of course, purpose of the society, and so. And when I've been, hiring people and interviewing and so on, I've always been asking, okay, so why do you want to work for sustainability? And for me, it's been important that the people, has been able to share something, and it could be private as well as professional, but really feel like, yes, this is something that I really want to do, because then I believe that you have the drive, and you will push things forward, because in sustainability, you have to be a little bit of stubborn, and things can take also a long time, because things are complex. So it doesn't kind of change by a night. And then it's important to have that kind of drive in your backbone, so to say.
Yeah, it has to come from within, right?
Yes, exactly, from the heart. Yes,
like you say. Yeah, exactly. I think as we start to wrap up here, I'd like to look ahead a little bit as well, Helena. What is it that excites you most about the future of sustainable IT? Either in emerging technologies or new mindsets, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think that traditionally in sustainable IT, I mean, it's been a lot of focus on the data centers, on the cloud, computers, used IT equipment, and so on. What is kind of the next step and has already emerged is about the software and how we code, how we build the softwares, green ops, for example, and this also ties into AI. So this is an area that we are now, exploring and so on. I've been running some pilots on this in the past, and I think that's super interesting because having seen the evolution of IT, during my career, where you started, you had a server and you had to code and just use that server. Now, with the rise of cloud and so, you have limited resources, you have limited kind of cloud resources. So from that perspective, the coding you are doing and so on, you don't really need to think of that any longer. And I believe that there are a lot of things, we know that there are a lot of things that you can do and architectural decisions to make. And this is what we have to do, I believe, in order to kind of cater for the evolution we see on the AI and I mean the big data that we have. So that's kind of what I'm seeing and looking forward to kind of be driving more.
It's really, really interesting. And yeah, that you mentioned the term green ops as well, because I think there've been other articles that I was reading that kind of talk about how, over the next 5 or so years, that these kind of carbon intelligence systems where sustainability data drives real time business decisions will become as standard as ERP systems are today, which is really quite a bold statement. Do you see that kind of direction at Siemens now?
I mean, we are seeing that also, firstly, now with the reporting that you're putting together your financial reporting with your sustainability reporting. And then, I mean, it's coming, carbon accounting and so forth. And I believe in many areas, we see that you need to be able to see the money, you need to be able to see the carbon, you need to maybe be able to see the material you're using or so forth. So it's kind of sustainability is becoming a decision point on so many different places within within a process of a company. And I mean, also, as you're saying, these tools now, like green ops tools and so on, where you can see your energy consumption, you can see your carbon consumption, by your cloud usage. And you can then, more or less in real time, while you've done adaptions, you can see, okay, well, actually, this was actually, a positive effect here, or maybe we can turn things off, or maybe we don't need to log all the time and so forth. So and this is of course closely joined to cost. So here, I mean, we just have to also hope with the hyperscalers and so on to be a little bit more transparent. Now it's the transparency is on carbon, but not so much on energy, which I see is even if we are carbon neutral, we also should think about the amount of energy we use, even if it's renewable.
No, really, really nice of you to say. And yeah, well, like I say, so thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights with us today. I think your work is a real reminder that technology, IT, when guided by this real purpose that we've been talking about, can really move the needle towards a more sustainable future. So thanks again for joining us. And to our listeners, thank you too for tuning in to Builders. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone passionate about building a more sustainable digital world. Until next time, keep building, and we will see you soon.